A box is being constructed by cutting 4-inch squares from the corner of a rectangular sheet of metal that is 10 inches longer than it is wide. If the box is to have a volume of 476 cubic inches, find the dimensions of the metal sheet. So let's start with a picture of what we know. So we're starting out with a rectangular sheet of metal. And we're told in the original problem that it's 10 inches longer than it is wide. Well, we don't know how wide it is, so let's let that be our unknown variable, our x. So to show longer than, we can represent the length then as x plus 10. So our original width is x, and our original length is x plus 10. So now we're going to cut squares from each of the corners. So imagine taking each one of these corners and cutting out a square. So these are going to go away. Each of these squares is 4 inches by 4 inches. This is 4 and this is 4. This is 4, 4. So now imagine that you're going to take each of these flaps and fold them up in order to create a box. So along here we're going to fold up this flap, fold here, and fold here. So if you can imagine, you're now going to have like the bottom of a gift box. It's open on the top, but we're going to fold up these sides, tape them together to create an open-topped box. So what we need to think about is how long these new sides are going to be after we fold in these flaps. And so if our original width was x inches, after we cut off 4 inches from the left side and 4 inches from the right side, it's not going to be x inches across anymore. It's going to be x minus 4 minus 4, or we could write that as x minus 8. So we're taking that original x and then subtracting 4 from each side. Same thing here. If originally our length was x plus 10, we take x plus 10 and subtract 4, and subtract 4. 10 minus 4 minus 4, or 10 minus 8 leaves 2, so we have x plus 2. So if you can kind of picture this new box that we've got after we've folded up these flaps, we want to think about the dimensions of this box. Well, this is now our x plus 2. This is our x minus 8. And then thinking about the height of this box, when we fold up these flaps, the height is going to come from the size of those squares, and so the height is now going to be 4 inches. So in general, we can find volume for a box by taking length times width times height. So we're told that we need to have a volume of 476 cubic inches. So we're going to have 476 on one side of our equation. And then we want to multiply our three dimensions, our 4, our x plus 2, and our x minus 8. Just to make our calculations a little bit easier, we can go ahead and divide both sides by 4 instead of having to distribute with that 4. So 476 divided by 4, we have 119 is equal to x plus 2 times x minus 8. So I'm going to go ahead and distribute here on the right-hand side, FOIL this out. So x times x, we've got x squared minus 8x plus 2x minus 16. And for a quadratic, I want everything on one side together, so I'm going to subtract that 119 over to the other side. So we have our x squared minus 8x and plus 2x. We can combine that to be minus 6x. Negative 16 minus 119, we have minus 135. So this is the quadratic equation that we need to solve. This is one that factoring is a good strategy. If you're having trouble coming up with the factors, the quadratic formula would work here as well. So if you head to your calculator and look for some numbers that multiply to 135, we're going to need one that's positive and one that's negative to get our negative 135. You'll find that 15 times 9 is 135. Since we want these to add to a negative 6, I'm going to put the 15 with the minus and the 9 with the plus. So setting each factor equal to 0, we end up with two solutions to our quadratic, x equals -9 or x equals positive 15. Since x for us represents the original width for our rectangle, it doesn't make sense for x to have a negative value, so we're going to keep the x equal to 15. So coming back to our original piece of metal, our dimensions were x and x plus 10. So now we know that x is equal to 15, so that means that 15 plus 10 is going to give us 25. And so the dimensions for our original sheet, our units here were in terms of inches, so we'll have 15 inches by 25 inches. So in setting these up, a picture is definitely a key part. Start by thinking about how you can represent the original dimensions. For us, that was the x and the x plus 10. And then think about cutting out each one of those squares. The key part then is figuring out your new width and your new length for your box after you've cut out those squares and folded up the flaps. So for us, when we started with x plus 10 after we subtracted 4 from each side, that's where we got the x plus 2. And when we started with x, subtracting 4 from each side left us with x minus 8. The height then comes from the size of the squares that we cut out. That's where we got our height of 4. Multiplying those three dimensions together, we set it equal to our given volume of 476 cubic inches, and then work on solving our quadratic equation from there. We used factoring here, but the quadratic formula would lead you to the same solutions.